What would you do if you found your best friend having an affair with your wife right in the dressing room while you were busy perfecting his every line to help him shine on screen? This isn't a movie script, it's the naked truth hidden behind the glamorous suits of Golden Age icons. We're talking about a legendary actor who viewed sleeping with his director's wife as a trophy to spite the world, and another king of Hollywood who cold-bloodedly stole the woman of the very benefactor who had just saved his career. There are even haunting secrets of disowned children, and illicit flings on luxury yachts that studios spent half a century trying to bury. So what dark secrets did Major E. Studios spend millions to incinerate? Why did lifelong friendships end with such fatal stabs in the back behind the scenes? Join me as we unearth the most painful files of betrayal in Hollywood history. Brace yourself. Your idols might not be as clean as you think. Hit subscribe now to be the first to unveil Hollywood's next secrets. 1. Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor. Headline: The Billion-Dollar Scandal Betraying a Friend on History's Most Expensive Set. To kick off this list, we can't just talk about a petty fling. We have to talk about an earthquake. An event so shocking that the Vatican devoted an entire page in L'Osservatore della Domenica to condemn it as erotic vagrancy. Even a U.S. congressman at the time proposed banning the couple from entering the country, fearing they would corrupt the morals of an entire generation. This is the story of Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor on the set of Cleopatra in 1962. Let's rewind to the sweltering heat of Rome in the 60s. At that time, Cleopatra was the most expensive film in cinematic history, and the pressure was weighing heavily on 20th Century Fox. To ensure success, they cast the two brightest stars, the Queen, Elizabeth Taylor, and the Welsh actor Richard Burton. When cameras started rolling, neither was single. Richard Burton had a wife, Sybil, a devoted woman, and Elizabeth Taylor, she was married to the famous singer Eddie Fisher. What's worth noting here is that Eddie Fisher was no stranger. He was a friend within the industry, a colleague Burton frequently bumped into at lavish Hollywood parties. According to the book Furious Love by Sam Kashner and Nancy Schoenberger, the relationship between Burton and Taylor wasn't smooth at first. Burton, with the arrogance of a Shakespearean stage actor, once dismissed Liz as merely a movie star, not a real actress. But as they say, opposites attract, or perhaps hate turns to love. Destiny, or rather temptation, struck during their very first scene together. The scene required the two characters to gaze deeply into each other's eyes, and according to witnesses at Cinecittà Studios that day, the air around them seemed to freeze. It was an invisible yet intense gravitational pull, so much so that when director Joseph L. Mankiewicz yelled, "Cut, cut," neither Burton nor Taylor heard him. They continued kissing passionately to the astonishment of hundreds of crew members. But the real tragedy lay behind the lens. Eddie Fisher, Liz's husband, was also present in Rome to support his wife. He had no idea that right under his nose, his beloved wife and his handsome colleague were turning the film script into reality. In the days that followed, the brazenness began to escalate. Burton and Taylor didn't even bother hiding it anymore. They openly flirted, turning private line rehearsals in trailers into steamy rendezvous. Even the presence of husband Eddie Fisher began to become an obstacle. According to records, at one point, Eddie Fisher was banned from the set. The reason given was vague, but everyone silently understood. To allow Queen Cleopatra and her lover Antony to comfortably perform their love scenes both on film and in real life without being pestered by guilt. Imagine Eddie Fisher's pain. He had left his former wife Debbie Reynolds to chase after Liz, only to now be made redundant by Liz and another man right in front of the whole world. The Italian press at the time, the ones who coined the term paparazzi, stalked this affair closer than the Cold War. Photos of Burton and Taylor kissing on a yacht in Ischia became undeniable proof of this betrayal. In his diaries published years later, Richard Burton wrote about Liz with words full of passion, but also torment. He admitted her allure was an opium he couldn't quit, despite the fact that it would destroy two families. When the case file was closed with the brief two-word conclusion, Suicide, the evidence at the scene inside the house at 1579 Benedict Canyon was screaming a completely different story. One of a clumsily staged execution. Take a closer look at these silent but deceitful pieces of evidence. They loved each other madly, but the foundation of that love was built on the wreckage of trust and marital vows to others. Their story became the clearest proof of the saying, "In Hollywood, movie scripts are sometimes tame compared to what happens in real life." The Burton and Taylor scandal was as loud as an atomic bomb. Everyone saw it, everyone knew it. But not every star chooses to openly challenge public opinion like that. There are darker secrets hidden more carefully within cramped dressing rooms. In the next story, we come to a legendary sex symbol and a shocking secret involving a tiny unborn life, a secret that a famous screenwriter husband perhaps took to his grave without ever knowing. 2. Tony Curtis and Marilyn Monroe. Headline dressing room secrets. The sex symbol's denied child. Kissing her was like kissing Hitler. That was the famous and cruelest answer Tony Curtis ever gave the press when asked what it was like to film love scenes with Marilyn Monroe. The quote shocked the world. Why would a man compare the planet's most seductive sex symbol to a dictator? Did he hate her that much, or was it pure contempt? But years later, when the limelight had faded, the truth began to emerge. That cutting remark turned out to be just a heavy velvet curtain, clumsily erected to conceal a secret 1,000 times more painful. An illicit affair and a tiny life that was never born. Let's go back to 1958, on the set of the comedy classic Some Like It Hot. At this time, Marilyn Monroe was at the peak of her fame, but in the depths of psychological instability. She arrived late, constantly forgot lines, and needed alcohol to calm her nerves. Beside her was her third husband, the intellectual playwright Arthur Miller. Miller wasn't just a husband. He was stationed right there on set to rewrite scripts for his wife, trying to keep her lucid enough to finish her role. But Arthur Miller, with his thick glasses and serious demeanor, could not have guessed that right under his nose a different script was being rewritten in his wife's dressing room. Tony Curtis, the handsome lead playing opposite Marilyn, was no stranger. The two had dated briefly in 1950 before either was famous. And now, reunited in steamy scenes on a yacht, the old flame roared back to life. In his memoir, The Making of Some Like It Hot, published in 2009, Tony Curtis admitted, "When I went to her dressing room to try on costumes, we couldn't hold back. We were like two lost children finding each other. The irony and pain lay here. Arthur Miller, the lawful husband, was sitting in the next room, diligently typing away to fix every line for his wife, wanting her to shine. Meanwhile, in this room, his wife and her co-star were entangled in a guilt-ridden relationship. But the tragedy didn't stop at infidelity. Towards the end of filming, Marilyn discovered she was pregnant. It was the child she and Arthur Miller had long awaited after several painful miscarriages. But according to Tony Curtis's shocking account in his memoir, Marilyn confessed to him, "The baby isn't Arthur's, it's yours." Imagine the terrifying pressure weighing on these people. A star pregnant with her co-star's child, while her husband was still caring for her every day. Tony Curtis recounted that he and Arthur Miller had a tense confrontation right on set. But instead of a loud, jealous brawl, both men chose silence. Arthur Miller, perhaps out of overwhelming love for Marilyn, or to protect her honor, chose to ignore it. Or perhaps he simply didn't believe it was true. The story ends on a tragic note. Shortly after the film wrapped in December 1958, Marilyn miscarried. The child, whether Arthur's or Tony's, never had the chance to see the sunlight. The illicit affair ended in tears and torment. Tony Curtis later confessed that the quote, kissing her was like kissing Hitler, wasn't because he hated Marilyn. He said it because he was in too much pain, too jealous, and terrified of facing the public. He needed a shocking statement to make everyone believe he hated her, so no one would suspect the shady relationship between them. Marilyn Monroe passed away a few years later, taking the secret of the baby's true father to her grave. As for Tony Curtis, He lived the rest of his life haunted by the woman he both loved and denied. The story of Tony Curtis and Marilyn Monroe leaves us with a sense of the fragility and tragedy of artistic souls. They cheated sometimes out of loneliness, seeking comfort in a world of immense pressure. But Hollywood isn't just full of lovelorn, weak souls. There are men who view conquering women as a game, a way to get back at the world, or crueler still, a betrayal of the very benefactor who saved their life. The next character on the list represents coolness, rebellion, and masculinity. But behind that rugged exterior lies a story about a terrifying code of silence among men. 3. Steve McQueen and Ali MacGraw. Headline: The Code of Silence, when the King of Cool stole his savior's wife. In Hollywood or anywhere else on Earth, there exists an unwritten code among men: you never touch a friend's wife. Especially when that friend has just extended a hand to save your career from a nosedive. But Steve McQueen, the quintessential 70s bad boy, seemed born to break every rule, even that most basic moral tenet. Our story takes us to 1972 on the scorching, dust-choked set of the action thriller The Getaway. At the time, Robert Evans, Paramount's head of production, was Hollywood's uncrowned king. Powerful, wealthy, and married to a woman of dreamlike beauty, Ali MacGraw. Ali was America's #1 it girl, following the massive success of Love Story. She had it all: a glittering career, a doting husband, and a beautiful young son. In stark contrast, Steve McQueen was struggling. His recent films had flopped. It was Robert Evans, acting as a loyal friend who fought tooth and nail with the studio to cast McQueen as the lead-in. The Getaway, believing the role of the gritty criminal would launch him back to the top. Evans was right. McQueen delivered a powerhouse performance. But Evans made a fatal error in casting his own wife opposite that dangerous friend. From the very first days of shooting in Texas, the air between Steve McQueen and Ali MacGraw crackled with immense electricity. McQueen, with his rugged looks, piercing blue eyes, and raw instinctual wildness, was the polar opposite of the polished, gentlemanly husband awaiting Ali at home. In the famous documentary The Kid Stays in the Picture, Robert Evans bitterly recalled, while he was back in Los Angeles working day and night on post-production and marketing to ensure the film's success down in Texas, McQueen was methodically stealing his wife. This wasn't a hidden affair in the shadows like Marilyn Monroe's. It was a public, ruthless, hostile takeover. McQueen didn't hesitate to mark his territory with Ali right on set. Crew members recounted that the way they looked at each other wasn't acting. It was naked, unadulterated lust. Ali MacGraw later confessed in her memoir, Moving Pictures, she was drawn to McQueen like a magnet. His danger made her forget she was a mother, a wife. She described the sensation as being hypnotized, a fever so intense she was ready to throw everything away. The tragedy climaxed when filming wrapped. Robert Evans flew to Texas to collect his wife, expecting a happy reunion. Instead, he was met with ice. Ali MacGraw had decided to leave Evans' kingdom to run off with the bad boy McQueen. She abandoned her life of luxury, abandoned the husband who had saved them both to plunge into a life of uncertain adventure. This affair left an unhealable scar on Robert Evans. He lost his wife to the very friend he had just saved. For audiences watching The Getaway, they saw a criminal couple madly in love. But few knew that explosive chemistry was purchased at the cost of a shattered family and the most painful betrayal of brotherhood in Hollywood history. Ali MacGraw and Steve McQueen later married, but their life quickly descended into a hell of McQueen's jealousy and control. Perhaps that was the price for a love born of betrayal. If Steve McQueen stole a friend's wife out of wild instinct and blind love, then at least we can see a trace of human emotion in it. But the next story takes us to a different circle of hell. There is no love here, no torment, only cold calculation. What would you think of a man who considered sleeping with the wives of directors and producers a sport, a trophy to be flaunted for career advancement? Brace yourselves, because the naked truth from the memoir of our fourth character might just make you shudder. 4. Anthony Quinn and the Powerful Wives. Headline: treating directors' wives as trophies of conquest. If Steve McQueen acted on a wild impulse, or Richard Burton strayed to find a soulmate, our fourth character enters the game of love with a completely different mindset. Not for love, not by mistake, but for conquest. 11th Greta Garbo and Marlene Dietrich, A Secret Love Affair. Left posterity a shocking memoir titled One Man Tango. In it, he didn't hesitate to unveil the naked truth behind his romantic adventures. For Quinn, women were sometimes merely trophies in a war to assert his status in Hollywood. The truth emerged only through the research of Diana McClellan. The ironclad evidence included the silent film The Joyless Street from 1925 and behind-the-scenes photographs showing that they had once been closely involved. Even writer Mercedes de Acosta, a mutual lover of both women, confirmed the relationship in her private writings. This very background created a deep-seated insecurity within Quinn, but also forged a frantic ambition. He wanted to prove he was superior to the powerful white directors and producers sitting in the directors' chairs. And what is the fastest, cruelest way for one man to prove his superiority over another? It is to possess that man's woman. In the haunting pages of his memoir, Anthony Quinn admitted he found a strange pleasure in seducing the wives of powerful figures. It was a form of sweet revenge. When he slept with the wife of an arrogant director or a studio mogul, he felt he was the one truly in control, even if on set he was just a hired actor. The prime example of this complex psychology was his first marriage to Catherine DeMille. Catherine wasn't just an actress. She was the adopted daughter of Cecil B. DeMille, one of the most powerful gods in Hollywood history, the creator of monumental blockbusters. When Quinn married Catherine, all of Hollywood whispered that this poor actor was a gold digger. Cecil B. DeMille himself didn't value his son-in-law, often showing open contempt. In response to that contempt, Anthony Quinn chose to rebel in the shadows. Instead of becoming a model husband to please his father-in-law, he plunged into a string of one-night stands. His list of lovers was long, ranging from unknown starlets to screen legends like Carole Lombard or Rita Hayworth. But what was more terrifying was his attitude toward these affairs. Quinn didn't completely hide them from his wife. Legends say he left enough clues for Catherine to notice as a way to spite her powerful family. He wanted to prove, "You have money and power, but I am the real man that every woman desires." In One Man Tango, Quinn wrote about these conquests not with remorse, but with the tone of a proud man recounting his victories. He described making eye contact with a co-star's wife at lavish dinner parties, secret touches under the table, while the husband discussed politics or fleeting encounters in dressing rooms. That brazenness was a slap in the face to the hypocrisy of Hollywood at the time. But looking deeper, it was also Anthony Quinn's own tragedy. He used sex to mask class insecurity. He turned women into tools to soothe his bruised ego. In the end, despite having hundreds of lovers and 13 children with different women, Anthony Quinn was always haunted by loneliness. A glorious career with 2 Oscars perhaps wasn't enough for him to feel he truly belonged to the high society he both craved and despised. Those wives, after their moments of weakness, returned to their silk sheet lives, leaving only Anthony Quinn with his one-man tango, a dance of lust, power, and endless emptiness. Anthony Quinn's story reveals a brutal side of Hollywood where love is turned into a weapon and women become pawns on the chessboard of fame. But if you think deception only comes from ambitious outsiders like Quinn, you are mistaken. Even at the ivory tower's peak, where the most prestigious kings and queens reign, betrayal seeps into every breath. Imagine a perfect act lasting 30 years, an illicit affair happening right before the public eye, right under the nose of a husband dubbed the Prince. The next couple we mention are the king and queen of MGM. What terrifying truth did they form an unholy alliance to conceal? 5. Clark Gable and Joan Crawford. Headline: The King and the Queen. A 30-year affair, right under the nose of the naive prince. We often hear the saying, there are 2 things in life that cannot be hidden: being drunk and being in love. But in 1930s Hollywood, two individuals proved the exact opposite. Not only did they hide their love from the public, but they also concealed it perfectly from the woman's prestigious husband for years. A real-life drama played out right beneath the brightest spotlights of MGM. This is the story of the King, Clark Gable, and the Queen, Joan Crawford. To understand the weight of this affair, look at their status at the time. Clark Gable was the most desired man on the planet, the icon of rugged masculinity. Joan Crawford was the silver screen star with hauntingly large eyes, a self-made woman who rose from the bottom of society to become a box office queen. And the third person in this story, or rather, the most innocent victim in Hollywood history, was Douglas Fairbanks Jr., Joan Crawford's husband. Douglas Fairbanks Jr. was no ordinary man. He was the son of a cinema legend dubbed the Crown Prince of Hollywood. He was handsome, polite, aristocratic, and possessed a heart so kind it bordered on naive. He loved Joan madly and trusted her implicitly. But Douglas had no idea that from the very first moment Clark Gable and Joan Crawford met on the set of Dance Fools Dance in 1931, a fire had ignited between them that no force could extinguish. Gable and Crawford were like two perfect pieces of the same puzzle. Both came from poverty, both had scraped and clawed their way to their positions. They saw in each other a shared empathy, a wildness that Prince Douglas Fairbanks Jr., born with a silver spoon in his mouth, could never understand. According to the book Joan Crawford, The Essential Biography, their relationship wasn't just a fleeting flutter, it was a storm. They met secretly during lunch breaks inside cramped trucks, and even more audaciously right in Joan's own home when her husband was away. The most valuable and also the most poignant detail is the innocence of Douglas Fairbanks Jr. Many veteran MGM staff recounted that Douglas frequently visited the set to cheer on his wife. He would shake hands with Clark Gable, laughing and chatting with his wife's co-star, completely unaware that just minutes before the two had pulled away from passionate embraces. Douglas believed the close relationship between his wife and Gable was merely camaraderie to serve their roles. He was too decent to suspect anything. That decency became the perfect curtain for Gable and Crawford to continue their illicit affair. However, in Hollywood, there was a man more powerful than God himself, and nothing could escape his gaze. That was Louis B. Mayer, the mogul of MGM. Mayer viewed stars as studio assets. He had spent millions building Joan Crawford's image as a virtuous wife and Clark Gable as a charming bachelor. An adultery scandal would destroy everything. Secret studio documents later revealed that Mayer summoned both of them to his office. He didn't offer advice. He issued an ultimatum. End it immediately, or both your careers will be buried. Under the crushing pressure of the powerful studio system, Clark Gable and Joan Crawford were forced to back down. Gable later married Carole Lombard, another very famous marriage, and Joan continued playing the role of the happy wife beside Douglas for a while longer before divorcing. But the truth is, they never really let go of each other. That affair shifted from a raging fire to smoldering embers that lasted for 3 decades. Whenever both were single, or even when they had new families, they found their way back to each other as soulmates. It is rumored that when Clark Gable died of a sudden heart attack in 1960, Joan Crawford was one of the most heartbroken mourners, even though she had no legal standing to stand by his coffin as a widow. Their story leaves a melancholy aftertaste. Douglas Fairbanks Jr. lost his wife to another man even before the marriage ended. As for Gable and Crawford, they had the world at their feet, but they couldn't fully have each other because of the very fame they had traded their youth to build. That is the price of the limelight. You must play the role of a happy person in front of the lens while your heart bleeds behind the scenes. If the romance of Clark Gable and Joan Crawford was a sad ballad forbidden by circumstance, it at least carried the romance of two kindred souls. But as time went on, Hollywood became stranger and harder to understand. There are relationships that upon hearing make you ask yourself, why would they accept living like that? Imagine a powerful male star living with a mistress for 14 years. But the strange thing is, the mistress hadn't divorced, and her legal husband lived off the star's money. A public love triangle. A bizarre contract between three people. Our sixth character is a living legend, but his private life is a maze full of legal disputes and a coldness that chills the spine. Let's come to the story of Clint Eastwood. 6. Clint Eastwood and Sandra Locke. Headline: The bizarre arrangement, 14 years of living with another man's wife. How would you define a normal relationship monogamy? Or at the very least completely breaking with the past before starting something new? But Clint Eastwood, the icon of masculinity, the coldest cowboy on the silver screen, had a completely different definition. He maintained a relationship that the press at the time called Hollywood's weirdest, living as husband and wife with actress Sandra Locke for 14 years, while she was still the legal wife of another man. And you know what the craziest part is? Clint Eastwood didn't just accept it. He bought a house for the other husband to live in. Let's go back to 1975 on the set of The Outlaw Josie Wales. At that time, Clint Eastwood was already a superstar, while Sandra Locke was a young actress with a fragile, ethereal beauty. From the very first look, Clint chose Sandra. He chose her for the lead role, and he chose her for the lead role in his life, regardless of the fact that he had a wife, Maggie Johnson, and Sandra had a husband, Gordon Anderson. But the crux of this story lies with the husband, Gordon Anderson. According to Sandra Locke's shocking autobiography, The Good, the Bad, and the Very Ugly, her marriage to Gordon was actually a complex, childhood sweetheart relationship. Gordon was openly gay, a taboo at the time, and they married as soulmates to protect each other from a harsh world, not for sexual intimacy. Clint Eastwood knew this perfectly well, and instead of jealousy, he established his own private empire. He moved Sandra into his mansion, making her his lover and exclusive co-star in a series of hit films like The Gauntlet and Sudden Impact. Simultaneously, he bought another house nearby for Gordon Anderson, Sandra's husband, so he had a place to live. It sounded like a generous arrangement, but in reality, as Sandra later testified in court, it was absolute control. Sandra Locke became Clint Eastwood's property in the literal sense. For 14 years, she only acted in Clint's movies, only appeared beside Clint. She was provided with luxury cars and beautiful clothes, living like a queen in his palace. But what was the price for that patronage? In the famous palimony lawsuit that shook the California legal system in 1989, Sandra revealed shocking details about the dark side of this relationship. She testified that Clint Eastwood had demanded she undergo 2 abortions and a tubal ligation. The reason given was that their lifestyle was not suitable for children. Sandra obeyed out of blind love. She believed she was the only woman who held the heart of this wild cowboy. She accepted living in his shadow, accepted the bizarre love triangle with her gay husband, just to be with Clint. But she was wrong. To a man who views women as part of a collection, fidelity is a luxury. The end of this 14-year affair wasn't a smooth breakup, but a brutal discard. One day in April 1989, while Sandra was on set directing the film, impulse Clint Eastwood silently changed every lock on the home they shared. When Sandra returned, she found her belongings packed and thrown on the curb like trash. The security guard informed her coldly, "You are not allowed in anymore." Shock, horror, pain. The woman who had sacrificed her youth, sacrificed even the chance of motherhood, was now kicked to the street like a fired employee. Clint Eastwood even cut the utilities and sealed the house so she couldn't return. But Sandra Locke was no fragile flower. She did what few dared to do to boss Clint Eastwood. She sued him. The years-long lawsuit exposed the true face of a romance that seemed like a fairy tale. Sandra accused Clint of fraud and sabotaging her career. She fought to the end for justice, not just for money, but for the honor of a betrayed woman. Although they eventually reached a settlement, Sandra Locke's story remains a costly warning for those dreaming of living off someone else's aura. A relationship that began with a bizarre compromise with an ex-husband and ended with cold, changed locks. Hearing this, you might be losing faith in love in Hollywood. Is the movie Capital filled only with lust calculation and bitter endings? Don't turn off your screen just yet, because we have saved the best story for last. After all the storms of betrayal, there is still an exception. A romance that also began with stealing a wife, also blurred the lines between real and real, yet became the greatest legend of couplehood. Let's come to the final couple, where a 19-year-old girl used her love to rescue a middle-aged man from hell and wrote a rare, happy ending amidst the scandal. 7. Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall. Headline: Hollywood's Lolita, the 19-year-old girl who rescued a legend from a hellish marriage. We often condemn the third person. We often view romances born of adultery with a harsh eye. But Hollywood history has proven there is always an exception to every rule. And the most beautiful, greatest exception is the love story between Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall. This was not a case of husband stealing for lust or fame. This was a rescue. A 19-year-old girl with courage and burning love pulled a 44-year-old legend out of the darkest quagmire of his life. Let's turn back time to 1944 on the set of To Have and Have Not. At that time, Humphrey Bogart was an A-list superstar with the image of the stoic, gritty detective in Casablanca. But few knew that when the cameras stopped rolling, he returned home to a horrifying reality. His third marriage to actress Mayo Methot was dubbed by the press as the Battling Bogarts. Mayo was a heavy alcoholic suffering from paranoid jealousy. Close friends of Bogart recounted that their house was more like a battlefield than a home. Mayo frequently threw objects, set the house on fire, and even once stabbed Bogart with a knife in a drunken rage. Bogart lived in resignation, exhaustion, and gradually sank into alcohol to escape reality. He believed he would rot away in this hellish marriage, until he met Lauren Bacall. Lauren Bacall, real name Betty Joan Perska, was then just a 19-year-old model in her first film role. She was young and beautiful, yet possessed a maturity and an unusually sharp gaze. According to Lauren Bacall's memoir, By Myself, on her first day on set, she was shaking so much she couldn't control her body. To hide her nervousness, she was forced to lower her chin, look up with her eyes, and speak in a low, husky voice. That gesture inadvertently created the famous "the look," the gaze that melted Bogart's frozen heart. On screen, they exchanged the classic line, "You know how to whistle, don't you, Steve? You just put your lips together and blow." But behind the scenes, Bogart, a man 25 years her senior, found in this young girl the peaceful harbor he had craved all his life. Their romance was not easy. Director Howard Hawks, who discovered Bacall, objected vehemently. Jealous, he threatened to ruin her career if she dared to get involved with the alcoholic Bogart. On the family side, Bacall's mother also forbade it due to the massive age gap and Bogart's terrible marital history. But most importantly, Bogart was still a married man. He was torn between duty to his ailing wife Mayo and his intense love for Bacall. In secret love letters published later, Bogart wrote to Bacall with rare vulnerability. "Baby is nickname for her, I'm afraid. I'm afraid I'll ruin your life. But I can't live without you." And it was Lauren Bacall, that 19-year-old girl, who was the most steadfast. She didn't demand status. She simply stayed by his side, listened, and gave him strength. Her gentleness and intelligence helped Bogart realize he deserved to be happy. Finally, after months of torment and fiery arguments with Mayo, Bogart filed for divorce. Just 11 days after the paperwork was finalized, he married Lauren Bacall at a peaceful farm in Ohio. Contrary to all malicious public predictions that this May-December romance would soon crumble, they lived happily together for 12 years, until Humphrey Bogart passed away from esophageal cancer in 1957. Throughout those years, they became the most powerful, most respected couple in Hollywood. They starred in 3 more classic films together. The Big Sleep, Dark Passage. Key Largo stood together against political injustices in Hollywood at the time and raised 2 children together. When Bogart lay on his deathbed in his final days, Lauren Bacall stayed by his side every minute. She was the only one who could make the once notorious tough guy smile in the face of death. Their story ends this list as an affirmation. Sometimes true love sprouts from the most ironic circumstances. Humphrey Bogart betrayed his hellish marriage. But thanks to that brave betrayal, the cinema world gained a complete legend, and he finally found the true meaning of the word family. We have just gone through 7 stories, 7 different lives of silver screen legends. Some stole a friend's wife out of fleeting lust like Tony Curtis. Some out of revenge and insecurity like Anthony Quinn. Some out of bizarre arrangements like Clint Eastwood. But there are also those who defied everything for true love, like Humphrey Bogart. That is Hollywood. Behind the beautiful footage are flesh and blood human beings full of joys and sorrows, mistakes and salvation. They are stars in the sky, but their feet are still stained with the mud of the earth. Which of these 7 anecdotes surprised you the most? Or do you know other shocking secrets of old Hollywood that haven't been named? Don't hesitate to leave a comment below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. If you want to continue opening other top secret files with us corners, never lit by the spotlight, hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell right now. There are still many stories waiting to be told. Thank you for listening. See you in the next video.